Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke.Academy. Welcome to another Wednesday live stream. This, in case you were new here, works in the following fashion. If anything that I say doesn't make sense to you or is unclear, or if you have questions, even if it's not connected to what I'm saying, feel free to post in the comments. We are not live right now on Rumble, X, YouTube, Facebook, and Substack. A Substack audience, you are actually on a separate device. I think that at some point in the future, I may be able to live stream consolidated from the streaming platform that I use. But for the moment, I actually have to use a separate device for Substack, separate microphone and camera. But that's fine. Everyone has equal, ample opportunity to chime in and ask questions if they arise. I'd love to have your questions. I am reviewing the comments. So if you're on one of those platforms that allows for comments, feel free to type something in and ask your questions. Fire away. I want to try and get answers to you. A couple of things. The first thing, in case you don't already know, UnWoke.Academy is where the freedom economy meets follow the money. My background in institutional finance on Wall Street leads me to do all sorts of research into what's happening behind the scenes, what's funding the things that we don't like. So a lot of people are out there talking about protesting things like various companies that have gone woke, and you know the old adage that's now all over social media, go woke, go broke. Well, if you don't like the woke, don't fund it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what is the root of all evil? It's the pursuit of money. And I have been tracking for many, many years now the influence, the impact of woke Wall Street, globalist banks, and big finance in the woke world. There's huge pressure to push everything further and further to the left. It all, in my book, boils down to anti-American, anti-Western values, anti-capitalism, and all sorts of social communism. We should not want that stuff, and we certainly shouldn't blindly allow our money to be used to fund this stuff. And that's what's happening. I have proven it pretty much over and over again in things like that Parade of Woke Sameness. That's an episode that I did that showed ultimately how our money gets invested through an array of different types of investments, all kinds of different mutual funds, exchange traded funds, and things like them are surreptitiously investing our money in a very small and shrunken list of companies, which means those companies are getting arguably preposterously overfunded, while other companies out there that need money in order to grow and flourish and maybe become the next new big thing, they are underfunded. They're not getting enough money. We need to fix that. Let's bring back capital markets and let's make America great again. If you're one of those people who likes that concept, the expression, the idea of it, America first and make America great again, we're going to have to set the stage for it and fund it appropriately. And right now, that's the opposite of the direction that Wall Street has been pressuring us for many, many years now. It's not just Wall Street. I use the term Wall Street in sort of a blanket, generic sense. It's big finance. Big finance has been steering us into mass consolidation in really harmful ways. So people have started talking about it. Actually, a few years ago, it became somewhat common knowledge that the S&P 500, which is just sort of a sampling of a little bit of the stock market, that had consolidated into about 7 or 8 companies. I want to say 7 in total, comprised about 40% of that index. And so many people have now attached themselves to that index. It's really damaging and harmful. It means underfunding for all sorts of other companies that need the money. And it means way too much emphasis and funding on that small number of companies. So, a few things, and I want to dive into how we fight that because it's actually easier than you might think. It might sound daunting once you start to understand the message that I'm working on getting across, which is that capital markets have been intentionally broken. The due diligence, the examination of what makes a good investment versus a bad investment, it got broken a long time ago. And it's up to us to insist that it get fixed again. And the emphasis be put back on good companies, good sound investments. And that's everywhere. If you have an IRA account or 401k, it doesn't matter. If you are saving your money somewhere and it gets invested for you, either through a stockbroker or advisor or through mutual funds or both, maybe you have an advisor that then picks mutual funds, there are fees that you're paying. So you're paying them to make those decisions for you. And if I'm right, and all they're doing is really just sort of putting a few layers of fees on top of putting you in the same investments as virtually everybody else, that's you're paying extra for damaging harm. Don't do it. There are a few things that we've built here as a piggyback to the research that we do at UnWoke.Academy. One is the financial PMA. I'd love for more people out there to one of two things. Grab the research that we do, and if you're a DIY sort of person, go find a discount brokerage online and start working on duplicating and take advantage of the research. By the way, at that point, you are, as always, you're responsible for the returns that may result. I'm very hopeful on your behalf, and I think you'll like a lot of what we're doing and the results that we've been seeing. But you can take that and run with it anywhere. If you want help and you want to be in a, a, a group that work together to help each other, that's what the PMA is for. It's a financial private membership association. It's designed to try to create some privacy for individuals, which is very rare to find in the world of finance. And it strips out a lot of those fees. So there are no financial advisor fees, there are no management fees. The only thing are wherever you end up working and building your portfolio, you will have trading costs. But those will be disclosed by that trading platform. Anymore, those are so inexpensive. It's unbelievably inexpensive to build a portfolio. And built that way, you don't have the manager making woke decisions for you. You don't have a murky sort of investment environment. You know what you own. It's clear, it's transparent. And the fees, generally speaking, from everything I've seen, the cost of ownership, let me put it that way, it's cost of ownership, not fees, because the fees are gone. You get rid of the fees by building a stock portfolio. Get rid of the advisor and management fees and the mutual fund fees and all that stuff. You're paying them, as I've said, to create this opaque, murky environment where you don't know what you own. You have an ongoing fee that gets siphoned off. And hold on a second here. we may be having a little bit of this is recording. So I looks like you may be having a little difficulty with the broadcasting software. It's pretty rare, but every once in a while that happens. If that's the case, then we will be publishing this. We'll go back and with maybe a little minor editing, I'll put this back out on the web. But rather than pay all those fees to other layers of people and then have mutual funds that, as I've pointed out over and over again, keep investing virtually everybody in a small number of the same companies over and over. I did one just looking only at Vanguard. Vanguard has, what do they have, 38 funds or something. And I found mass commonality, nearly identical components in like 29 of them. So people who, and just using Vanguard, picking on them for a moment, using them as an example, in that environment, in that scenario, somebody could be invested in all kinds of different Vanguard funds and think, well, this is great. I'm really properly diversified. I have all kinds of different types of investments and not really know under the hood. They might own um, six of or seven of those mega globalist mega cap overfunded, what I call the globalist bubble, in 29 different places, way overexposed to those companies. All of that disappears when you build something that you can see and understand. That's going back to what we know works. So I've used the analogy several times through the years since I launched UnWoke.Academy, kind of like comparing UnWoke.Academy to the exploration of health and wellness that many people have ventured into over the past 5 years. I don't know if it's just me or my social media feed or if it's really truly the world that we live in, but it seems like a lot of people out there doing all kinds of really cool and interesting things to try to make themselves healthier, better people. Like they're growing vegetables and stuff, and then they're sharing it online. That's really cool. I love that stuff. They're taking it upon themselves to understand what's going into their diet. And many of those same people question pharmaceutical. And so that's an analogy that I've used really since the beginning. If you haven't heard me say it, I used what I saw happening during COVID with an organization called America's Frontline Doctors as a template. There's no connection or affiliation between UnWoke and them. I just saw what they were doing and I admire it. And I view myself as one of those people um, from Wall Street who left Wall Street because they saw how broken, bad, and corrupt it is, and how manipulative and how engineered it is to be this top-down sort of structure that pays lip service to actually caring about the individual, the consumer, the investor. That's you. I don't like that environment. I think it's unhealthy, so I left. I ended up forming UnWoke, and now I really view those types of people who are at least willing to listen and think about the implications of the choices that they're making. That's my audience. So some of those same people who think, well, maybe going to that big, giant, monolithic mega hospital that I think we can clearly see now is kind of controlled by big pharma, and go in there and get shots and pills and all that stuff and live in an environment where they seem to sort of prescribe to address the symptoms and not the cause. And there's very little effort or attention paid to the individual. And some of those same people who are now paying very close attention to the quality of the foods that they eat, those same people, those are our audience here. And so if that's you, or if you're curious about being that sort of person, keep listening, because all of those same things hold true in the financial world. Here's the way that it looks from my vantage. And I've actually worked with and worked for some very large hospitals not in a medical capacity, but in a financial capacity. So I've seen a lot of how the administration works, and I can compare, and I think I can see it clearly in mega hospital. The money, the massive amounts of money from big pharma exerts undue influence on the hospital system, and hospitals can initiate protocols that really rush doctors through, and they get disappointed or upset if a patient comes through and spends more than some minimal number of minutes, and if they leave without a prescription for whatever checked the box. So whatever the symptom is that they come in with, there's an expectation that the doctor meets with them, prescribes something, tears it off their pad, and that person leaves with a shot or a prescription of some sort. That's the methodology. That's the thought process behind a lot of today's medicine, and it's not good. It's not. It's harmful. I don't. I personally really find that abhorrent. I grew up in an era where there were doctors who would talk to you and ask questions and try to encourage healthier habits. And they would even mention, gasp, they would mention your sleep and your diet and your exercise and make encouraging comments. Then they're not going to go and force you to go outside and go to the park and walk. They're not going to force you to lift some weights or get to sleep earlier or monitor or watch your caffeine intake or whatever, but they might make encouraging suggestions. That's real medicine. And it's gotten to the point, and I read a lot online from people like Dr. Simone Gold, who started America's Frontline Doctors. In that environment, it's gotten, I understand, very difficult for doctors to even take the time to do that. And if they do, and let's say they get to the root cause and it's like, I don't know, a hypothetical. Watch your, go to sleep earlier and watch your posture, and you'll have fewer digestive issues, or I don't know, whatever it is. It's a hypothetical. If that person leaves and ends up feeling better, they stop showing up at the hospital and they stop taking those prescriptions, and the hospital makes less money. They're better off, but the hospital doesn't want that. In the same way, we have the world of finance that has lots of commercials and lots of advertising, and this big push from globalist money managers who have trillions of dollars, literally, in US retirement dollars. Retirement accounts combined is around $46 trillion. The amount of profit that spits and spins off of that is outrageous. It's unbelievable. And I worked in an environment, just by way of example, where I was I am a specialist in retirement plan administration. So I work on the design and implementation of things like 401k plans. And I worked with lots of other people in all sorts of specialties within finance. We had people that worked on business lending and banking and insurance and personal wealth management, whatever. We worked together, and I don't even know, like when I was on Wall Street, there were probably 10 levels of management above me. And there was one guy that was like the office manager, and then there was an office sales manager, and then there was a regional manager. And I think that like one jump above me was, it became public knowledge. I think he was making around $760,000 a year. And then the regional manager was like $1,400,000. And then you got all the way up to, I was aware that the chairman during the time I was there was kind of forced out, and he was given I want to say an $83 million package to leave. That money comes from somewhere, and where it comes from is all of the fees that generated by holding and managing those trillions of dollars. So anyway, those companies have so much money that they can influence the performance, timing, time, and behavior of all sorts of financial advisors. So people who work in finance There is a very similar pressure to that applied to doctors, telling them what they can and can't do and what they should and shouldn't sell. And it focuses on the profit of that organization, not on, hey, take a whole bunch of time and meet with the family or business or whatever, whoever the client is, whatever that client looks like. There's very little appetite for figuring out what's best for them. And it's gotten so bad and it swung so far that we got to that point where, and I'm waiting for somebody to come along and argue that I'm wrong, where we had the vast majority of everybody all across the whole spectrum, from banking, insurance, wealth management, financial advisor, all of them were doing the same thing over and over for their clients and putting clients in virtually identical answer with very few questions and very little research or understanding on the part of the financial advisor. It was just, hey, this is the thing to do. I was told in the sales meeting that everybody should buy this fill in the blank fund. Well, when people like me are able to come along and lift the hood, and we've got a whole lineup, and we show that what's ultimately inside of those funds is the same thing or close to it over and over and over again with different names, that's a really unhealthy environment. I know I've said all that before. I want to get today to how we fight back. And I want to use another analogy because there's some of you, I think, that tune in to this and listen to my podcasts that know me in a few other realms as well. If you don't already know this, I am one of the hosts of Ohio Political News. That's the state that I'm in. I'm in Ohio. And we host a live stream at least once a week with all kinds of guests, and we talk about news in the political realm, Ohio political news. I am also, for over 2 years now, I've been working on something called precinct strategy. This will come back around to UnWoke. In precinct strategy, my friend Dan Schultz and we coach the nation on how to get involved at the local level in politics. I know you're wondering, what in the world does politics have to do with this discussion about finance? So hopefully you were able to follow the analogy that I gave of that top-down management structure, the product-driven structure of big pharma influencing hospitals, and in a similar way, globalist bank money managers influencing financial advisors through those Wall Street firms. They're nearly identical. But I want to talk about the kind of the politics behind it and apply kind of a third rail in this discussion. In that environment and talking politics, I see a lot of similarities there as well. In the political realm, there are people who are willing to look at and interested in looking at the stances, positions, and platform of politicians. And I applaud them. I think more people should. They are questioning whether or not that politician meets their value system. Is that somebody, for instance, who is, if you're conservative like me, is that a politician who's going to match your conservative values? And those few people who pay attention to that, they should be applauded and encouraged. And those people who pay attention, not just during that cycle, listening to the people who go around with their elevator pitch or their stump speech and present themselves, hey, vote for me because I'm going to do all these great things once I get into that office. But more importantly, pay attention and follow them once they're in office and once you do elect them. Because the same thing holds true with whatever sort of financial advice that you're getting and wherever it comes from. If somebody comes into your human resources office at your company and says, hey, here are great investments, your 401k plan, and you sign up for a couple and check those boxes, pay attention. Look, it really doesn't take much. With today's technology, I can't hold it up as an example because I'm actually using it to live stream on Substack, but I've got my smartphone. My smartphone or any sort of web browser on any computer anywhere can do great research and figure out if you're funding bad woke stuff. I did a big expose on BlackRock. I did one on Vanguard. I've talked about many, many other companies that you may want to avoid if you don't want to be in the globalist bubble, if you agree with me that there is a globalist bubble, and if you want to be funding better things. But there's also a deeper, equally important level. I hope that you get great returns. And so far, you've probably tuned in and heard the examples that I've given of the woman that we're tracking who's in the financial PMA. She was first invested with my help on October 8th, 2024. She is experiencing wonderful returns based upon the research that we're doing. That's one piece of it. But there's a hidden piece that I'm going to keep pushing on because more people need to understand and know about it. And that has to do with the votes that are connected. So let's compare two different approaches. And I want to make this make sense for you. If you go back to what we know works, and historically, before the late 1980s, 1990s, when mutual funds took over and convinced everybody that it was just way easier to just pay some manager to make your investment choices for you. Prior to that, there were people out there, most people, if they had a little bit of money to invest, they ended up with a list of different companies that they were invested in directly. So they owned stock in companies and stock and other types of investing. By the way, none of this is investment advice. I'm sharing with you the research and different ways and strategies, and we're getting to something called proxy voting. What it is, why it exists in your life, and is off radar for you. When people had that stock portfolio, it was clear, it was easy, it was transparent, they knew what they owned, and they would get something called proxy votes. That means anytime there was a big decision to be made on those companies, they got a vote on the board members, whether or not they would choose to use something called DEI, or whether or not they were pursuing ESG. Those two stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is critical race theory driving racism into America and the West. ESG is nonsensical. It's still not even actually defined. It's just this virtue signaling nonsense from the far left that is manipulating markets. It's Green New Deal repackaged as environmental, social, and governance. The companies that are using that stuff, at some point, they voted on it. And if you're in a 401k plan or IRA or something like it, the chances are pretty good that your vote was cast on your behalf and probably cast in favor of that stuff. It's called a proxy vote. The biggest three proxy voters, the biggest three institutions out there that cast massive billions and billions and billions of votes on behalf of average investors are the usual suspects: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and others. By investing through them, overwhelmingly, with rare exception, the investor has given them the authorization and said, invest my money, choose where to invest it. You can pick the companies, and you can pick as far left, wokadoodle, anti-American as you want. I'm being facetious, but that's happening. And while you're at it, those votes that I get in return for my investment dollar, go ahead and feel free to vote those on my behalf. That's the way mutual funds work. That was an unforeseen downside to us taking our hands off the reins and giving over control to mutual funds. So, very much like those people that come around every once in a while and say, vote for me for such and such office because I'm awesome and I'm going to do a great job and I'll fix things and make your life better. And then they get into office and do all sorts of nefarious things that put money in their own pockets. And it seems these days everything overwhelmingly shifts to the left and moves us further and further left and into the realm of social communism. The same absolutely holds true in the world of finance. I could get into the weeds about why it's so much more profitable for those money managers out there, things like mutual funds, to just funnel everybody into the same 8 companies, 8-ish, 30, whatever it is, that globalist cabal. And you know who I'm talking about. It's Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, that clique, that cabal that are just, they're the globalist bubble, way overfunded in my book. So if you run an investment management firm, which would you rather do if you want profit? You want to hire big staff all over the world to continually do research into all the companies that are available and try to find and suss out the good companies and try to always be on the lookout for the bad companies and try and make sound, smart, prudent investment choices for the trillions of dollars you manage? You want that staff? Or do you just simply want to say, hey, let's just take all of our mutual funds and I don't even know if they've fired, scale back, just ignore the need for research and due diligence, and just put everybody into those same 30 companies? Doesn't matter what the name of the mutual fund is or the intended stated description of the investment objectives. Those 30-ish companies, I keep saying 8, those are 2 unrelated things. Instead of doing their job, we have many money managers out there that's more than cutting a corner. That's, I argue, rampant fraud. It's fraudulent, horrendous behavior. It destroyed capital markets. They are coming back, I believe. We see huge, huge gains in real capital markets. And that's kind of the opposite of all the 30-ish companies that got overfunded. Hopefully, soon we see a mass migration of people getting out of those 30-ish companies and their inflated prices. And hopefully, we see people doing a better job of research and getting into true markets. And in my book, that's the same and fits in directly. It fits directly with the same people who are making smarter, healthier decisions about other areas of the life they live, the foods that they eat, paying more attention to the politicians that are putting in office, because that's a big part of it. And it's a sticky, nasty web they weave. I've covered before that revolving door between Wall Street and Washington, D.C. and factor in big pharma, because a lot of them, they just bounce around. They're politicians that leave and go to work for big pharma, or they leave Wall Street and go to work as a politician, and then they leave there and go and work as a lobbyist for a pharmaceutical company. All of that's harmful, generally, almost universally. Related to this, I want to ask a favor of you. Go on whichever platform you prefer, Rumble, YouTube, or just go to UnWoke.Academy. I put up a 14-minute video a couple of days ago that is, it makes suggestions about a better way to run 401k plans. I'm going to put it in this context because for most everybody, understandably, it's a very different concept. It's one that I've been talking about actually since I started in 2006. And then in 2009, I started something called fee-based401k.com. I still actually own that website. It just redirects to one of my current companies. But I'm going to put it in this context, and then I'll bring it back around to everything we're talking about here and how to be healthier and make smarter decisions. So this is just a parable. This is an analogy. Imagine a company, imagine where you work. And I'm going to use cell phones as an analogy because everybody understands cell phone bills and cell phone use. Imagine everybody in the company pays figure um, $180 a month for their cell phone for the family. So here's a question, if the company could pay some flat fee for all the employees and all their families to have cell phone coverage, unlimited, let's say it's $5,000. If a company could pay a flat fee instead of all the employees paying a monthly $180, the math is pretty easy. And companies can very easily decide whether or not there's value in that. Let's say you have 1,000 employees, and each of the 1,000 employees is all paying $180 a month to maintain their cell phone plan. Some companies might choose to pay $5,000, and then they presumably get a tax write-off and a deduction in their taxable earnings as a company, and it drastically reduces the amount that's paid to the cell phone company. That actually applies more directly than you might think to the world of 401k administration. I know that will sound strange to you, but there is actually no requirement anywhere, no law, code, or rule or requirement that the employees, the participants in 401k plans, be the ones that pay the fees. There are all kinds of different fees that get subtracted out. I've done some math several times through the years. I would estimate around 65 to maybe $97 billion a year comes out of 401k plans to pay advisor fees. That's that recurring ongoing fee that gets subtracted out. I have a video that's about 14 minutes long encouraging companies out there to think differently and explore maybe not siphoning that money, those savings, out of all the employees, participants, 401k accounts. It's easily doable. I've been talking about it and doing it since 2009. I'd love to see more financial organizations and individuals out there taking the same approach or similar. Take the model and run with it. In the same way that lots of people, I know I'm sort of jumping analogies here, but there are people who did things like America's Frontline Doctors and started advocating for healthier ways of us running our lives. I'm doing the same in the world of finance. And many of those organizations, and I think now there are dozens of them. What's that? The Wellness Company? I think that's one of them. I think they're based in Canada. And America's Frontline Doctors and Dr. Sherry Tenpenny is another example. They're all over the place of these doctors, these medical practices that said, let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to what we know works. So as I advocate for people using 401k investments to at least consider getting into a stock portfolio so you know what you own and you're not paying management fees anymore, at least consider that. And I walk through the steps encouraging companies to add that to 401k plans. And as I advocate for companies to consider paying those plan fees directly, all of that has a net positive impact on the individual because it's just simple math. If you subtract the amount of fees that you're paying, if you reduce them, oftentimes you can reduce them to zero. That means that all of those savers out there end up better off. Watch the video. It's 14 minutes, and I show some examples. I've actually charted some stuff. You can see in neat little charts. If your investment return, whatever your mutual funds or whatever your investments, if you reduce the fees that you pay or eliminate them, you end up with more money. It all boils down to having informed public when it comes to your health, when it comes to your vote and the impact that it has, when it comes to your money and what it ultimately goes toward funding. The more information you have, the better off you are. You can do things with your money that you can agree with, that don't counter your value system. So the expression, once again, that we like to use, I have a note here next to my camera. What we fund today becomes the future the next generation inherits. What we fund today becomes the future the next generation inherits. So if we agree to just go along with woke Wall Street, putting virtually all of our money into those 30-ish companies, those 30 companies will control the world in 10 years. That's what the next generation would inherit. Wouldn't you rather fund a thriving economy and real capital markets with small business all over the place and all kinds of new business constantly flourishing and growing? That's capitalism. That's what created America's middle class. Wouldn't it be wonderful to bring that back again? So just like we went through with COVID, with everybody being told you need to roll up your sleeve and get the jab, in the same way, we have had now going on a decade of people who work in finance all effectively saying everybody should all invest in these 30-ish companies. I don't agree with that, and I want to fight back. I hope more people agree with that and choose to fight back themselves and fund a better, brighter future. While you're at it, I hope you eat well, find good doctors, and vote some better people into office. I hope all that made sense to you. To me, I see the parallels between those. This has been another live stream episode of UnWoke.Academy. If questions do occur to you later, feel free to email me at info@unwokeinvesting.com, info@unwokeinvesting.com, or send a message to me on any social media platform. In the meantime, thanks again for tuning in. Take care.